70 quid to fill up 2 motorbikes. Well, it's hardly to be expected because the 2 motorbikes in question are 2 30-litre monsters, the BMW R1300 GS Adventure and the Ducati Multistrada V4 Rally. We're on our way to the Peak District, so let's go and park up somewhere nice so I can tell you what makes these bikes tick. The reason we're here doing this test is because of the new Ducati Multistrada V4 Rally, which is new for 2026. We're here in February 2026, so it's just come out. The rally version of the Multistrada, it's basically a big tank, 30 litres, which is a reason we're here. We're testing the big 30-litre tanks. A bigger screen, spoke wheels, longer travel suspension, a bash plate, all the little goodies that give it kind of that rally feel. And the changes for 2026 are kind of minor, but they all add up to quite a lot. So the engine has been Euro 5, still 168 bhp V4, still a fantastic engine. And it's the electronics really, which has really been gone through. So the thing's got a Ducati vehicle observer now, which is basically an electronic system that knows where the bike is in space using all its existing sensors. So that means things like the traction control works more smoothly, the anti-wheelie, the suspension works a lot better now as it does do on the normal Multistrada, and we'll talk about that later on. So I rode this at the launch a couple of months ago and was quite blown away by it. It was an absolutely fantastic bike. But the whole reason this exists is because of that. BMW R1300 GS Adventure, the OG adventure bike. So this has got a 30-litre tank as well, and that's what the adventure series is all about. It's about big tanks doing loads of miles in one go, maybe. We'll find out about that later. And the R1300 GS, the normal one, came out a couple of years ago, and this came out in 2025, which is the adventure version. So like the Ducati, it's got a few more kind of long distance tweaks, more off-road focused tweaks. And what I'm really interested in is riding this, because although I've ridden the R1300 GS a lot, including in group tests against the normal version of the Multistrada and other bikes, I haven't ridden this a lot. So this is really a voyage of discovery for me. In terms of price, well, this costs, as it sits here, £26,000. So this is loaded with goodies that comes on a BMW press bike. We don't have a choice of the spec we get when we get these bikes from the manufacturers. But if you went for the normal adventure, it's about 18 grand. Then there's the TE version, which is about 20 grand, which you get a lot of goodies with. And then this has got loads of stuff on it, like cast wheels, or forged aluminium wheels rather, instead of spoked. But I think spoke look better, like the Ducati, a comfort seat and a load of other goodies. So it's kind of, say it's 20 grand. The Multistrada V4 Rally is £25,000. We've got a version which is called the Radar and Adventure Travel or something like that, which is another couple of grand, which makes this 27. This comes with panniers, actually, that version. We didn't bring the panniers with us because we wanted to kind of test the bikes in a similar state. As soon as one bike's got panniers and one hasn't, they kind of feel different, especially when you're filtering through traffic and that kind of stuff. And finally, it's worth noting the 3 bikes that aren't here. So number one is a KTM 1390 Super Adventure S or R. That hasn't got a 30-litre tank, although it's got a big tank, so it's not quite like for like with these. Then you've got the Triumph Explorer versions of the Rally and the GT. Again, Triumph have discontinued that bike now, even though you can still see it on their website for 26 and in dealers, which would point to the fact there might be a new one coming soon. And then finally, everyone's favourite, the Honda Africa Twin. Great bike, but it hasn't got the big tanks. And we're just interested in these as kind of the ultimate kind of big mileage bikes. And talking of which, we're going to have a little ride now. We're going to carry on around the peaks, and then we're going to have a chat to my good friend and legendary road tester, Simon Hargreaves, who's a marathon mileage man, and ask him why big tanks are so important. I've heard and read about your hunger for doing big miles and your love of big fuel tanks. So what is it about a big fuel tank you love so much?
I think there's two things. I think the first thing is, and it's a bit of a cliche, but I love the freedom of a big tank. So even if I don't do it, it's the idea of being able to lift my feet up in Peterborough and I don't put them down again until I'm in Scotland. And I really like that, because to me there's something about the sort of the freedom of motorcycles that sort of encapsulates. And it's, so there's that. And the other thing I like about them, I think, is the convenience. Because if you've got a big tank, okay, you can do big miles in one go, but it also means you don't have to stop as often if you're doing short journeys. So if you're commuting, when you've left work, I just want to go home. I don't want to stop at a petrol station on the way. And if I've got a big tank, I can do a whole week without stopping. There's nothing better than getting down to your bike in the morning, turning the key and looking at the fuel tank, and it's got half a tank in there, but you know that's going to last the rest of the week. So
it's more than just sitting on a bike for 5 hours solid and running.
Absolutely, yeah. There's this misconception. There's a common misconception that especially among the manufacturers, that if we ask for a big tank, we want it because we want to sit on the bike for a long time, and it's not that at all. It's those short journeys and just not having to refuel. And I think the whole thing is offset by the inconvenience of having a big tank, which is obviously the weight of the thing. You know, it's a bigger package to deal with. And when you're talking about these fellas, pushing them around on a gravel drive at our age, it starts to get a bit problematic. So it's always a compromise. But for me, big tank rules.
Big tank rules. And we've done quite a few miles on these bikes now. If you were going to do one of your big mile munching trips, which one would you choose?
Oh, how much fun do I want to have when I get there?
Good question. Let's just say you just want to grind out the miles. You want something comfortable, easy to ride.
I would take the GS, the GSA, because it's so sophisticated. For me, it's so well-rounded. Nothing intrudes on the riding experience. It's the easiest one to just get on and ride and not have a thought about anything other than the journey. If I wanted to have fun when I got to the other end, the Ducati is more like a conventional motorbike. It's got more, they're not rough edges, but it's more active, more engaging, and it feels more alive and fun. So it's a real compromise. If I could ride this to get there and then have that to ride around on, happy.
We can arrange that.
Good.
I've got to say that these two adventure bikes have been absolutely perfect for the journey that we've been doing over the last couple of days. It's middle of February, it's really, really cold. We've been grinding out loads of miles, and those bikes are just the height of kind of opulence and luxury. And in terms of a touring bike, if you think of these bikes as touring bikes, I know they're adventure bikes, we haven't done any off-road, but the reason people buy these bikes is because they're very roomy, very comfortable, very commanding riding positions. You can see over traffic. And these particular bikes, with all the bells and whistles they've got, heated seats, heated grips, adjustable screens. The BMW's is electronic, the Ducati's is manual, all enveloping bodywork. You just sit there in a cocoon of kind of almost stillness. The wind noise is quite high sometimes, depending on the wind direction on adventure bikes in general. But generally, they're just lovely places to be. They're nice and plush. The engines are characterful. They handle beautifully. They've both got good tyres. I mean, they're really, really hard to fault. And the other thing that makes these two bikes so good is the fact that now they've both got lowering devices on. So when you come to a stop, all of a sudden these bikes become very manageable. And the whole point of this test is the fact that they've got big tanks, so you can go for miles and miles and miles. So let me tell you how far you can go. BMW has got the best MPG, 41 MPG, and that's got a theoretical tank range of 272 miles. And the Ducati is slightly less, that's 38 MPG with a tank range of 254 miles. So that's a mixture of kind of peaks riding, quite spirited sometimes, bit of motorway, bit of town. I reckon if you're on a big tour, you could probably squeeze out a lot more miles from the tank. So that's pretty good going. And as Simon said, big tanks are more than just how far you can go on one tank without stopping. It's the convenience of always going to your bike and always having a little bit of fuel and not having to visit petrol stations that much. We've tested all of these bikes in their non-adventure form before. Last year we did a big group test in Sicily, and the new Multistrada, as it was then, won the test quite convincingly. It's very, very refined now, even though, as we said at the beginning of the videos, the changes aren't massive, but all these little subtle refinements just make a much more polished Ducati. And BMW in the R1300 GS have almost gone the other way. So whereas the R1250 GS was kind of quite warm and a cuddly adventure bike, which is why people loved it so much, the 1300 version almost went a little bit too sporty, almost 1 foot in the S1000 XR territory. So with those adventure bikes, the BMW, we didn't really rate it. The suspension, it was always a little bit fidgety, it was always moving, it was quite aggressive. But with this adventure version of the BMW have brought some of its GS-ness back. It kind of does feel like the spiritual successor to the R1250. It's really refined, it's really smooth. It's like all the rough edges have been knocked off the R1300. And as a result, it's come right up to meet the Ducati. So the BMW, this is the first time I've ridden properly the Adventure. And when I jumped on it after being on the Ducati all day, I was really, really surprised because it looks like a beast, that big fuel tank. It's quite handsome actually, I think, without the panniers on. It looks really cool. Although its looks were very divisive when it was first launched. But I was really surprised. I hopped on the Beamer and it suddenly felt a lot smoother and a lot more manageable than the Ducati, despite the way it looks. So the actual bit where you're sitting and just between your legs is actually very, very slim on the BMW. So despite a big wide tank at the front, it actually feels very small and very manageable. Things like the heated grips just are a little bit better. The electric screen, which is an option, is a little bit better. The dash is easier to read. The switchgear is slightly easier to access, especially with the big winter gloves that we're wearing at the moment. The engine's got loads of torque. It hunkers down into the ground. It's got really good grip. Fantastic tyres, like I said, excellent brakes. It really is an amazing machine. Both of these bikes are just absolutely spot on. So despite what we're going to say later about the winner of the test, they're both amazing. And really it kind of depends what you want out of your adventure bike in terms of what you're going to choose. But although the BMW has almost caught the Ducati, it's not quite. So the things that made the normal Multistrada V4 and V4S so good with its electronics, it just makes that bike a much more kind of complete and rounded bike. It's much more refined, much more polished, even though, as Simon was saying, the engine's got quite a lot of character. That V4 engine it's got not rough edges, but it kind of roars and crackles in all the right places. And the BMW is actually quite refined in that respect. But the improvements to that Multistrada and what they've done to the Rally has kind of elevated the Rally, and it just finishes just a little bit ahead of the BMW, but you're really kind of just splitting hairs with those two bikes. So in terms of these big tanked adventure bikes, the Ducati just takes it, but only just. Just overall, it's kind of more of a complete package. Just the way the suspension works, the way it moves over bumps, the way it kind of rolls into corners, the progressiveness of the brakes, its agility, its engine character. It's got more power than the BMW, so if you really want to ride it hard, it does edge the BMW. It's very comfortable. It has got a nice dash, it has got switchgear, it's got all the bells and whistles. You know, these are both very expensive bikes, but if you've got the money and you really want to go big distance, then the Ducati is a winner, but the BMW isn't far behind. And that really mirrors the group test that we did last year with the non-adventure bikes, although there was a bigger gap between the Ducati and the BMW, and the BMW actually finished behind the Triumph last time out. But obviously the Triumph isn't in this test for the reasons we gave earlier. So yeah, the BMW, I wish that the normal GS was as kind of round and inviting as the Adventure is. So I think the Adventure is definitely the best BMW. So that's it for this test in the peaks, which we really enjoyed. I built up a right thirst. So thank you very much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.